Thank you for joining Tahseen Consulting on our webinar series on how to help Indian startups expand into the GCC and sort of how to demystify the region in general. The inception of this web series was started a couple of years ago when we asked ourselves as to why do Indian startups not see the MENA region and the GCC as a viable place for expansion, and why so few of them have done it before. We have been thinking about the convergence of the India and the MENA tech ecosystems in the past, and the recently signed CEPA agreement between between UAE and India, we believe is going to supercharge the tech ecosystems in both countries, right? And we know that India is on track to sign similar agreements with the rest of the region and further abroad. So it started with a simple question for us as to, why do companies like Ola don't enter the GCC ride-sharing market? The region here has a significant Indian diaspora, including other South Asians as well. And, these large startups and tech companies, have already a brand shelf space in the minds of the diaspora. So why don't Indian startups take advantage of it more? So we started speaking to a lot of Indian unicorns and Sunicorn founders, and to ask them why they were not considering an expansion into the GCC, the UAE, and the wider MENA region. And the kinds of responses that we got were somewhat expected. The biggest one being that India is such a huge market in itself, and our focus is at home. So we want to be more comfortable at home before we look abroad to expand. They also mentioned things like that we prefer expanding to markets like the UK or Singapore, which again have similarly big diasporas and are probably easier to navigate, is what they thought. Another reason for that is because for a lot of Indian founders, the GCC and the MENA region is like a black box, right? I mean, they don't know too much about it. It is extremely fragmented across not just different countries, but within the countries as well. Uh, so we thought of, let's see what we can do to sort of help demystify, this region. And we started working with a few select clients to sort of make this region less of a black box. And the webinar today is the third of our series, where we try to, help Indian startups and Indian tech founders understand this region better. And today we are focusing a bit more on fintech. The first session of our series 2 months ago, we focused on an overview of the region and why it is viable for Indian tech founders to look at and to expand into. The second one last month was where we invited the CEO of Cars24 Middle East and the Chief Business Officer of Lenskart Middle East as well to share their insights with us. And today we have an exciting bunch of people for all the viewers to meet. We have the founder of Card91. And we have Sortur, who's the CEO and founder of SquareCircle Global as well. So I'm going to hand this over now to Ajay, the founder of Card91, to tell us a bit more about Card91 and see what they're doing in India and their expansion plans for abroad as well. So Ajay, if you could take over, that would be great.
Thanks, Amit. So if you can hand me over the control, I want to share my screen.
Sure, I think you can already do that. If not, just please let me know.
You just have to end your
all right
sharing. Yeah, now I can do it. Yeah, once.
All right, sure.
I hope everyone can see it.
Yep, it's clear.
Yeah, great. So first of all, thank you for Tahseen, Wes, Walid, and Romit for providing us this opportunity to present Card91 to a STEAM forum and basically taking us across Indian boundaries to MENA region. So to summarize, we are a card issuance infrastructure We proud ourselves that we are looking at a market which is so large, and the things are changing so fast in India, in SEA, in MENA, and in various other geographies. So targeting that, coming to the point, let me get into the details. So we are a card issuance infrastructure based out of India. The genesis is of India, and that's what we are proud of. We have written the entire infrastructure, which will help business issue payment instruments. So when we say payment instruments, there are two sides of payment. One is on the acquiring side, the other one is on the issuance side. So there are lots of companies on the acquiring side, basically all your payment gateways and POS companies, while the issuance side, companies which are trying to issue payments on NEFT, RTGS, the older ones, on cards like debit, credit, and prepaid. And there are new frontiers like CBDC, crypto, etc. So we are trying to pioneer the issuance space where we'll be helping businesses issue a payment instrument. To start with, we have a prepaid card infrastructure, which we went live recently, around 2 months back. With the help of a bank, we help businesses issue co-branded card to their audience. Basically, in this case, businesses bring their distribution and bring the capital and solve their payment use case. The underlying technology and underlying regulatory hassle, partnering with bank, partnering with network, everything is taken care by us. Why business need cards? So payments are everywhere. If you look around, you'll be paying for something, like for every services, every product you have to pay. When business pay, they need some kind of visibility. They need some kind of control around their payment. In a typical scenario, when you give out a cash or give out a check, you are not sure what is happening with your payment. So businesses want to control the payment at the very last node. Let's say I have given a 2000 rupee, 2000 Indian rupee to my driver and then ask him to get the petrol from a petrol bunk. I am not aware whether he is paying 2000 rupees or 1900 rupees or what is happening. Or let's say take example of lending company when they give out a loan. The user, the consumer, whether, so let's say it is a very specific loan for a education or for a hospitalization need. Once it goes into the account, the lending company is not sure what is happening with the payment. And then they require that kind of visibility at the last node where it is getting spent and who's controlling it. So, so that's where the card comes handy. Basically, card gives you a real-time data on what is happening. This helps in lots of things like bringing the control on the payment, bringing the visibility on the payment, taking care of all the fraudulent activities. Like you are sure that, let's say if you issue a payment, issue a loan for hospitalization, it should be spent on a hospital leave and not in a restaurant or anywhere else. So that's where the card is very, very helpful. Other than that, the data is all digitized. The transaction is all digitized. So you get the real-time data on the transaction. You can take a call whether you want to approve or disapprove. And once the transaction is done, it will be real-time settled into your own ERP, your own accounting software. So that takes care of all your need of reconciliation and then lengthy process of sitting, like making the 10 people sit to do the recon at the end of the year and then bringing out the transactions. So all those things will be taken care of because it's the entire card life cycle is automated here. So you don't have to worry about that who will be doing the recon and at the end of the year whether you will be able to match the transaction or not. All things will be taken care of from the technology itself. Some of the features which Card91 as a new generation payment issuance engine we are offering. So we how we are different from the traditional ones. Basically, the prepaid cards are there since ages, but what we are saying is that we have written it in a new fashion where you have the visibility of the transaction. So there you can put some kind of rules around it. So the data will come to you. You can decide whether you want to release that transaction at the real time based on the rules set by you, or based on the some dynamic controls which you want to put. All such things are possible. we have a complete business dashboard as well as APIs. So all modes of integration are possible. We have a mobile first approach. So the user to whom you're giving the card, he'll be having a virtual card as well as physical card. The virtual card will go on the mobile. For that, we have a mobile SDK, which goes to the business app. So let's say that some lending business wants to offer card through us, they can integrate our SDK in their mobile application, and then the card will be seamlessly integrated, and the user can see the virtual card and use it for the transaction. Other than that, there are other things like you can do your expense management lending on card. All such permutation combinations are possible. We have seamless APIs for that. We have kept it very simple, to be honest, so that you don't have to go through the plethora of APIs. So the integration is very fast. Like in a typical scenario, the tech integration takes around a week's time, and we are trying to reduce it. The idea is to keep it simple, keep it dump proof, so that anybody and everybody can come and like do it in simple days, not months or years, and go live with their card program. So they should be focusing on their business rather than focusing on the technology side of the card infrastructure. And when I say that we have a complete card lifecycle management, so you can issue the card, you can there's a transaction visibility, you can approve that, disapprove that, and once the transaction is done, it will be automatically reconned to your system. So the entire card lifecycle, entire payment lifecycle will be taken care of. So you don't have to worry about that. How it happens is that there are issuers who are by regulatory authorized to issue cards. So in India, I can tell you the India case that there are two kind of issuers. Either we go ahead and take issuer license from the central bank here, which is RBI, Reserve Bank of India, or the banks are issuer. So in our case, we said that let's go ahead with the second option, where we will go to the bank and rent their license to issue card. So in our case, we have two banks whom we are partnered with and two networks as of now. And we are just a technology service provider. So we created the entire infrastructure around it. It takes care of all your technology for issuing the card, and takes care of all the regulatory and legal needs, which are, so there are certain rules imposed by the central bank, and then the individual banks who are renting out their license, they also put some rules around that. So we take care of the entire thing, and then for the business, we are the single window through which they can operate this entire infrastructure and issue cards in the market. And we take care of all other integration with the bank, with the network, and everyone. Some of the use cases, so you must have seen lots of cards around in the market. Like lending can be a very big use case. In India, we are realizing that it is like almost 60% of our business is around lending. Currently, what we are doing with the pilot lines, basically consumer lending, SME lending. People are receptible to the idea that they should be given loan on a card, and companies are finding it useful because there's a beautiful card, beautiful designed card co-branded, which goes in the market, and on which these companies are giving out revolving credit in various other formats. Other than that, you can do expense management. So we can power all kind of expense management companies. We can power it through our infra. They can bring in their solution, their distribution to the clients, and we can power the card for them. Several other use cases like on-demand service, Forex, etc. are there. And as and when we are going to the market, we are trying to find out new use cases that, since as I said, that payments are everywhere, we just have to evangelize where we can put a card and basically structure that payment around a card, whether that is feasible or not. So that's what our team is doing. We have a strong team from comprised of bankers and fintech players in their previous avatar, and then they are going to the market, checking out each and every payment flow and evangelizing whether there is a need of a card can be structured around it or not. So several new use case will come into picture in coming years. That's what we are looking at. As I said, we have currently two banks under our fold. One is Yes Bank, which is a large private sector bank. Another one is SBM Bank, which is a very futuristic fintech friendly bank in India. And then we have already partnered with two networks, Rupee and Visa. With Master, we are also under discussions, and the agreement and certification will come soon. And then there are a couple of other banks we are discussing with. So like this list is going to grow in coming months. Geographical expansion, why we want to do that? Basically, there's a need of payment digitization across the globe. As I said that not only India, but SEA, MENA, Europe, there's a huge need of digitizing payment transactions. And some of the rails on which payments are getting digitized are common. And that's where we think that it is pertinent for us to, once we are stabilized in India, we should go out and check out other markets. MENA is our preferred market, to be honest. And when we got in touch with Tahseen, Wes and Walid, we said that after India, MENA could be our priority. We can start with the UAE as a market, because there's a lots of changes in terms of regulatory, in terms of payments, in terms of fintech, which is happening in MENA region, and that could be our primary driver. And as a company, we feel that since the underlying rails are same, which are like Visa and Master, so we can ride on those rails and bring our system to some of these geography and start operating. As I said, why MENA? MENA is one of our preferred geography because there's lots of movement in terms of fintech, in terms of regulatory, in terms of digitizing the entire infrastructure, and that's where we can come handy. Lots of new age businesses are coming up which require digital payments, which require cards, which require other kind of enablement. And one of the area which we can pick is card, where we can help all such businesses with the prepaid, and in some point in time we'll also come up with a credit infrastructure, so we can help businesses with the credit also. And we feel that we are working on some of these lines, looking at UAE as a first market in MENA geography, and we feel that it's the right market for us to get into. Team, we are 3 co-founders, all seasoned entrepreneurs with at least 20 years of experience each, from various backgrounds. So like I look after the sales and strategy. Kush is again a dear colleague from IIT Delhi, and he is from the payments background, so he look after tech and products. And Vineet is again my senior from IIT Kanpur, and we are friends since like last 25-26 years. Vineet was also co-founder of Myntra, which was a large e-commerce fashion player in India, and which got acquired by Flipkart. Other than that, we have a team of seasoned players like Amit Shah, who's our chief business officer. He is a seasoned banker with 25 years of experience. AG is my senior again from IIT Kanpur, but he is career banker, spent 17 years with Citi at various locations, and then in his last profile he was with Instagram as their CBO. And Animesh is a hardcore techie. Like he can day in day out he can churn out code. So he's designing our system, and we are very proud of it because we say that we are not a typical fintech or typical banking infra company. We are designing it for scale. We treat banking infra as a e-commerce, so that anybody and everybody can integrate it with seamlessly without any hassle. So all those worries about managing a fintech infra should not be happening. It should be very seamless APIs, very simple APIs where you can integrate and start in minutes. That's what our aim is. We are backed by with some very good angels from the fintech and BFI space in India and abroad, including Tahseen. And then some of the institutional funds who are backing us, they are pretty well known in the market when it comes to fintech and infra space. So that's we consider ourselves lucky to have them on our cap table and basically guiding us throughout this journey. So I'll take this opportunity again to thank Wes, Walid, and Romit and Tahseen for inviting us and presenting our case. And I'll let Romit take this over. Thank you, everyone.
If you can just let me share my screen again.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Right. So, very interesting point, Ajay, on you viewing the UAE as the starting point to your global expansion, and this is what we speak to with a lot of founders about on how the UAE we view the UAE as a jumping pad into the rest of the region and globally, because as you mentioned that the customer base here is very technology savvy. They are early adopters of technology. The tech ecosystem is booming right now, and that once you get sort of stabilized in the UAE, it is fairly easier to jump into other large markets in the region like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, for example, and then later further abroad as well. So I'd like to welcome on our panel Samir as well. Samir is the founder and CEO of SquareCircle. He has 20 plus years of experience in supporting startups in the MENA region and across the world, really. He is the regional director for the Founder Institute for the GCC as well. Welcome, Samir, and Ajay. Of course, we have you on the panel as well. So I wanted to start off, our discussion with just a few broad points. Both of you have been involved in, starting and scaling businesses which are, global in nature. What sort of advice would you, give to, let's say early stage founders who are looking to expand outside of India? What do you think their pathway should be, and what are the first things that they should be looking at ideally?
Brilliant. Should I take up the opportunity?
Sure. Absolutely, Samir.
Thanks, Romit. First of all, very grateful to Wes, Romit, and the entire Tahseen team for bringing me onto this panel. I think this is a great initiative. Very thankful to the Indian and the UAE governments for initiating the SEPA, which actually increases and flushes a lot of trade between both the countries. India being the second largest commerce partner between for the UAE, and so my experience, I've lived here for 19 years, been in the region for 21 years, moved around the world looking and helping startups, helped startups from the US, Europe move into the MENA region. There are typical peculiarities in terms of how the external world still looks at MENA as a market, or UAE as a market, GCC as a market, and the typical perception is, one is scale and second is culture. So on the earlier mention, while we always spoke about the domestic market for Indian startups, Indian entrepreneurs is so huge, unless and until they're pushed by investors or they have strategic partnerships with and clear visibility in the MENA region to expand, they do not take that step. So most of the Indian founders I have interacted with have found to be developing business relationships between India and the US. But this recent trade agreement has completely sparked a change. Early stage startups, I would advise is continue building in India. India is a great talent pool. Continue building your products in India. But when it comes to validation, because here you have over 190 nationalities, and Expo 2020 was a great example set by different Indian entities to participate and showcase how technologies can be adopted across pavilions and world pavilions. A good opportunity is for you to come validate when you're well funded, because the customer acquisition cost in this market is pretty high, and a lot of founders mistake that it's easier to enter this market bootstrapped and then try to build and scale in this country. But suddenly they realize that the funds are drying up, and they might have to find a new ground to fundraise. So I think given the whole scenario between how the sovereign wealth funds are investing into Indian specific opportunities, how the early stage VCs or angel networks are then building a bridge. If you look at the networks like Venture Catalyst, India Accelerator, all of the different accelerator and VC networks are now seriously building bridges between two countries. So my suggestion is continue building where you're building. If you're an Indian founder, when you scale and raise investment, best opportunity for you to initially incorporate in the UAE. If you're a fintech startup, I would definitely recommend considering DIFC and ADGM to kind of incorporate, because that gives you flexibility and sandbox to kind of test your products. And then from here, once you understand this market better, once you form the relationships better, then Saudi Arabia is the next big thing, and I'll talk a little bit on how you expand into that market as well. So that's a little bit of piece of advice to get you started. Thank you, Romit. Back to you.
Sure, thanks, Samir. I wanted to, you mentioned scale and culture, and I wanted to double click on culture and what you mean. I'm sure it's not just your overall heritage and culture, etc., but it's more to do with the culture of customers and the culture of investors and the culture of the ecosystem as well. So could you maybe expand a bit on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously, culture can be sometimes very broad and to the advantage of some of the founders who are from the Arab world or from the region. It could come to their advantage. But culture also means on how the local customers in the UAE, in the GCC, perceive your solution. So, for example, earlier there used to be a friction of a lot of Indian founders building stuff, but they used to be, not to the top-notch quality as we see today, because now we have a success story behind that, right? But still, what happens is even when they come with funding, they're still going to spend considerable amount of time for the customer discovery process. So, my suggestion in terms of cultural understanding is, for example, know your customer before you launch in the market. And that involves significant primary research. If you have not done that sitting in your home country, then you might find difficulty in actually adapting to the culture, talking their language, understanding customer and investor personas as well. For example, if you know who are the investors you might be targeting to actually angel or pre-seed or invest in your company, right? And that might completely change when you understand the local culture. For example, there might be some high net worth Emiratis who might be interested to angel invest because they really love to take that solution to the entities which they are closely associated with. On the scale part, I think this is a limited market, I would still say. So when you are creating a product and business roadmap for the GCC / MENA region, I think a few things you need to understand from a scale perspective. One is this solution going to be limited to a particular country or a particular city? For example, I would still say adoption of solutions in Dubai is faster than Abu Dhabi, faster than Sharjah, or faster than Ajman, or because the digital literacy in these Emirates is still emerging, while as Dubai has taken a leap. So where do you want to start, right? And will it give you enough, without giving you enough burn, will it give you enough revenues to kind of kickstart into operating into other Emirates and then scaling globally? So my suggestion is primary research, extremely important. Understand which personas of customers, investors you want to target. Come with full preparedness. Come with funding if possible, because really, as I mentioned, I want to lay double emphasis, saying acquisition of customers, investors is quite expensive, and you don't really want to burn the money you've raised here. So I hope, Romit, that's satisfactory.
Yes, absolutely. Ajay, would you agree to that sort of pathway? You are yourself considering an expansion into the MENA. So have you sort of incorporated these kinds of things already within your plan, as to understanding the market first and doing your homework before jumping in and planting the flag abroad?
So I completely agree with Sameer. So luckily I have some exposure to the GCC, especially in UAE markets. In my previous avatar, I was dealing with a few of the customers and visited Emirates a couple of times. Now, first thing first, I'll suggest all early stage founders not to look to expanding to other geographies till the market fit is achieved in your current geography, and you have some significant scale, because taking a half-baked product to other markets is not going to help you at all. That is the first advice. Second advice, as Sameer mentioned, that there could be a cultural shift also when you are migrating from your current geography to some other geography. And in that case, what we are saying is, so like from my previous exposure to the UAE market, I have noticed that there could be a difference in consumer behavior, how they perceive in India and how they perceive in UAE market. One second, please. 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. So there's a difference in consumer behavior. There's a less fault tolerance in UAE market. People try to get the solutions which are working almost perfectly, and that's what I have noticed in my previous avatar. And in our current role also in Card91, what we are trying here is that we need to perfect it to a level, and then probably we can expand it out to the GCC and as I mentioned, that UAE is the gateway to the GCC. And we will be first coming to the UAE market, and then again we have to do this exercise once. Basically, we have to do a product market fit in UAE market. So whatever is fit in India might not fit in UAE, and then we have to look at those parts.
Right.
And yeah, there's a significant burn. So I completely agree with Samir that you have to be well funded if you want to take the experimentation to some other market, especially UAE. So you have to be significantly funded, and then only you can take this exercise.
Right. Since we're talking about funding, and this flows into my next question, Ajay, you have had some, GCC investors, and you have active angel investors, and this question is for Samir as well. What kind of advice would you give to, again, Indian founders who are trying to raise funds from the GCC and the MENA region? I know that, Samir, you mentioned large sovereign wealth funds are actively investing in large Indian startups and, Indian tech giants already. And maybe they do not yet have the appetite to shell out for, smaller scale startups as of yet. So is there a particular direction that you would advise them to look at when they're trying to raise funds from the region here?
Yeah, so I'll basically one thing which we have noticed in past 10 years. So investors based out of Emirates, and when I say investors, people are now looking at technology very, very differently. Earlier, Emirates was more of a technology consumption space. The geography was more or less consuming technology from various other geographies, so like maybe product based out of US, Europe, or let's say from India. Emirates was mostly consuming, and investors were not savvy looking into investing into such companies. But now the scenario has completely changed. Investors based out of, and I'm talking about the angels and small funds, not about the sovereign wealth funds. They are now looking to diverse their portfolio, and India is one hot destination as we look at it. In terms of the startups, we have produced recently produced 100 unicorns. The 100th unicorn was here last month.
Yeah.
So it excites everybody. It excites everybody. There's a cultural closeness also between the UAE and the India market, and there are several initiatives between the Indian and UAE government which eases out all the investing pain and everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's great for any Indian founder, early stage founder, to look at the UAE market, particularly to get some renowned angels like we got you guys, Tahseen invested in us, and we are humbled from that. There are several other UAE angels who have invested in us. Idea was simple, that we have something in our kitty which can be expanded to a global level, and this can be a large play, including India, SEA, MENA market, and that's what we have presented. And investors are excited about technology, and that's the key factor. If you have the right kind of solution, right kind of technology, very, very futuristic, you will get the right kind of investors.
Right. Absolutely. What we're seeing is when we, when we are supporting startups to raise funding in the region, and we take them to investors, the attitude has seen a vast change over the past decade, where people who were looking to raise funds from the Middle East would just treat it as a petrodollar slush fund, that hey, just come get the money, But now the money has become really smart. They want you to deploy here. They want you to deploy it quickly. They want pilot projects. They want proof of concepts before they open their wallets. Is that something that, Samir, you have seen as well over the past few years?
I totally agree, and Ajay, congratulations on getting some of the UAE angels on board.
Thank you so much.
It's tough. It's tough, and you're lucky. So I'll share my experience of Founder Institute. Where we have participation from over 17 countries globally. A lot of Indian founders wanting to kind of participate, in our program. The objective they participate with is the end goal is to raise funding. Now, the tricky point is look, if you do not establish a very strong product market fit and not ready for funding, then are you in the right ground to play the funding game, right?
Yep.
And I again want to reiterate the point that funding comes with traction. If you have established solid local traction, and if you look at some of the programs like Card91 and Dubai Future Accelerators and some of these localized government programs are all to kind of create a strong impetus and entrepreneurship culture for the local economy by bringing in global entrepreneurs into the country. So definitely from a funding scenario, how will the ecosystem stakeholders, for example, whether it's government, whether it's angel networks like Dubai Angel and Saudi Angel investors, who are very strong in what they do, and they also invest in bits and pieces and have very good experience with them. They are your early investors, or they will help you establish, if you're a foreign startup, overseas startup wanting to kind of make an impact in this region, after you have finished certain validation of your product in the market, you are then approaching these angel networks, because these angel networks have very good angels, obviously including Tahseen Consulting, who kind of then take you to the right, both the market as well as investor groups, right? So what is ideal for an early stage founder is, while they have piloted and earned some revenue in the Indian market, what I've also seen beautifully some of the smart founders doing is participating in competitions conducted by Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry, by Abu Dhabi, and these competitions give out reward money, right? Yeah. And they utilize these reward monies to then start establishing their local operations. And so I would encourage all the early stage founders who have kind of validated, who have a very strong intent to enter the MENA market. And the first point of entry is UAE. I strongly recommend considering the UAE because of its flexibility in licensing policy, tech adoption, tech talent, collaborative environment, global connectivity, initiatives rolled out every single day, I would say, very dynamic initiatives. So consider this as your home ground to play a market, to play a larger role in the MENA region. So I think the local accelerators are also playing a pivotal role. For example, if you're a travel startup, travel plus fintech, there are programs specifically. If your supply chain, if you're manufacturing into 3D printing and stuff like that, you have hardware related. So participate in those programs, participate in competitions, give you reward monies, help to establish, and during that time you can parachute in and out just to reduce the cost of living here. And then once over a period of 1 year, you have established a strong credential, you have won some monies, rather than bootstrapping your own investors' money or your own money, right? Then you start building and start growing the local market. And this is what I strongly recommend to all the founders, that wherever your home base is, validate and raise from your home base before you enter. Again, I want to repeat that point. Thank you.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned, the competitions being held by Dubai Chamber and the various government-sponsored accelerators like the Dubai Future Accelerators, because my next question, on this is, how important is it for Indian startups to sort of engage with the government? And what I mean by that is, as you mentioned, there are 100 different kind of initiatives run by both the Dubai government and Abu Dhabi government and the federal government on all levels for various, technology niches, right? So, and what I mean by, engaging with the government is showing how you can align with government objectives and government strategies for the future. How important would you rate that for a startup who's wishing to enter the UAE market and the broader region?
Yeah, so the alignment, I would say, is understand why they're doing this, why the government is doing this. One is economic development. If you understood really the objectives from the government perspective, then you are in a big game. So, but again, some of these programs want you to move here. Okay.
Yes.
Now, practically, whether it's possible, at least one or two founders and hire the local, locals or expats here, or even look for co-founders. Now, you have to think from a practicality perspective. If you're building somewhere else and trying to kind of enter this market, if that's feasible and you want to build a global business from here, entering. So some of the great examples I would give is companies like Zomato. Those succeeded in India, but Zomato formed a complete different subsidiary in the UAE. The best example I would say is Cleartrip.com, right? And Cleartrip completely flipped their strategy to be a UAE first company to the world, right? And these are some of the examples I want to kind of even if you are early stage, look at these kind of opportunities to align with the objectives, to align with the government objectives, funding. The government is also considering, conducting specific roadshows in top cities in India. For example, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Delhi, in Mumbai. The UAE government are conducting scouting roadshows. I want all the founders, all the early stage founders to attend these scouting roadshows, right? Because first of all, your visibility to this market increases considerably. Second of all, there might be chances that you get a spot in one of their programs, which actually then completely diminishes your cost of moving here, right?
Absolutely.
Because you will be funded, you'll automatically be funded by them, right? And so attend these programs in India, and then ensure that again, your intent should be very strong that I want to make a base in the UAE, right?
Yeah.
That should be very clear from a part of the business model perspective and how on a growth and scale model perspective. And from a employment laws and coverage and contracts enforcement, this country is completely very transparent in terms of hiring and especially new entrepreneurs. I was very fortunate the other day to catch up with Vijay Shekhar Sharma, by the way, and on the same day he was awarded the golden visa when we met at Thai Global Summit in Dubai. So this is the kind of opportunity the UAE is giving to Indian entrepreneurs, by the way. So please look up all the information. If you have any doubts, please consult us, and we'll be happy to share all the information available in the ecosystem. Please do not go on rumors or things which are happening in media, because a media is a lot of misguide out there and to its own benefit. So this is what I would recommend, Romit.
Right. Ajay, would you agree to that? And how different do you think it is, for a founder to engage here versus engage with the government in India? I mean, I would presume that India would be a market engagement first and policy engagement second market. But here it is, I guess, more favorable to engage with the government on an equal footing as well.
Right. So I can fairly talk about the fintech since we are in this area. We are in a highly regulated space, so we have to think about the policy movements also, other than the marketing, how market is panning out, and that is largely driven by the policy, how central bank will look at the payment instrument. And same thing I feel is important when we look at the UAE market, because payments are liberalizing. They are all governments are digitizing their payments, and UAE is one of the top names where they are pushing policies to digitize the payments. But there are certain other aspects also. When you digitize a payment, what will happen to the payment data? And data is very, very crucial for any sovereign country at this moment. And then more and more countries are now looking at the localization of data. So such policy decisions impact businesses a lot. So it will be, as Samir advised, it will be a wise decision to look at how governments are operating. So let's say if I have to move to a UAE market, I must get into some kind of discussion with the government and the policymakers and look at the current regulations. So what are the needs to deploy my business there, deploy my offerings there, and how government is supporting. There are certain initiatives, like we have came across so many like all the accelerators, all the government support. UAE is looking forward to transform the country into a financial hub. I keep on meeting so many founders who now wants to basically make Dubai as the entry to the world. So in previous days, it was more of like, if you have to go to a global market from India, you might have to go to Singapore or might have to go to US. In certain areas now, I'm meeting founders where they want to, from India, they want to go to Dubai, and then they want to take it to the other part of the world.
Right.
So such changes are coming up, and largely because the government is supportive. Government is looking at technology, at infrastructure, at a very different level. And as you mentioned, that economy is not about petrodollar now. It's just more of technology and new cutting edge developments.
Right.
And that's where we feel, we feel that this is the right opportunity to get into.
We also advise, we always advise our startups that we're supporting to have a government first approach. And what I mean by that is, in terms of regulations and policies, do not hide from the government, because the government here is willing to listen to you. They're willing to adapt. They're willing to change if you can show them, economic opportunity. But if you, sort of hide and try to, keep away from the regulations, it just never ends well, right? Because they want to welcome you with open arms, but if you don't agree to that, it's never going to end well for you. So always a government open and government facing and a regulatory policy facing approach is what we advise for startups. So I want to broaden this discussion a bit from UAE, right? So we analyzed around 40-50 startups from India who have entered this region over the past decade or so. And we've seen that very few actually, end up going out further from the UAE. There were, just a handful who have entered the Saudi market. And I think just only one who has entered Egypt. I think that was Zoomcar. So Samir, why do you think that, Indian startups don't, venture out further, or is it just a matter of time that the Indian tech ecosystem is just maturing right now and they are more willing to take risks abroad, and we will see a further expansion as time goes on?
Yeah, I would want to start with Egypt first. See, Egypt itself in a market, Egypt is very much like India. Ample tech talent, cutting edge universities, with top universities, and Ajay comes and his team comes from some of the top universities in India, right? Egypt also has some of the very cutting edge universities. The local market in Egypt is full of new inventions, fintech being the topmost play in Egypt, right? And look, the strategic and geographic position of Egypt is actually they're building for Africa, not for the Middle East. Right? And so whether Indian founders want to make an inroad from Egypt into Africa or from Egypt to the Middle East is a question to ask for the Indian founders. And most of them want to prefer, because the challenges in Egypt is and most of the Indian founders who are already successful in the Indian market do not have the bandwidth, learning curve, willingness to actually localize the product in, say, Arabic, because most of the product built for into Egypt might be required to be translated into Arabic, which might require tough, a lot of engineering talent, right? And I would say some of the fintech products are already localized and made for the global market. And similarly, you will find I also want to take the opportunity to kind of put a seat in Egyptian founders. I've worked with many Egyptian founders who find it equally hard to enter into the Indian market, right?
Right.
Because again, it's very tough competition. It's competition of talent, I would say. But given the agreement, see, the market in Egypt is limited. It's going through a transformation, geopolitical transformation. What you will see, a lot of Egyptian founders I've known since 2012, since Turn8, is I've actually seen a lot of Egyptian founders move to the UAE to build for the world, right? And now Indian founders moving to the UAE to build for the world, the congregation is actually happening in the UAE, right? And this is the beauty, right? For example, if Egyptian founder meet in the UAE and kind of align, if there are strategic relationships built here, it makes then you don't need to go to Egypt. You already have a strategic partnership. This partner can take you to Egypt, right? So that beautiful moments are coming now, are happening already in the UAE. I see a lot of that happening with the change of policy, with Egyptian founders wanting to enter India, and so I want to specifically point out on Saudi market. So I want to talk about Saudi. See, Saudi, though they have rationalized, they've completely changed policies. If you take from 2018 to 22, there has been a huge economic, political, startup-friendly environment. I personally have participated in many of those events where I'm the first-hand observer to that transformation. Now the challenge is, again, a lot of I want to reiterate the point of culture, right? So the cultural aspect plays a big role in Saudi, unless and until you have a localized Saudi offering, your product will not fly, So that's the difficulty. While in the UAE right now, because of the huge expat population, obviously Saudi also has an expat population, not as huge as UAE, but the adoption, the transiency of UAE is comparatively less to Saudi. So they want more localized, they want more language specific, culture specific solutions. And again, like India, Saudi itself is individual market as a whole is huge in terms of geographical coverage. So it takes about 3 to 5 years to cater to the Saudi market. It's complex. Payment space, Sama and other entities have recently started opening their payment infrastructure. So if an Indian founder will understand the UAE payment infrastructure easily, because by the way, I just wanted to point out to Ajay that you're already transacting with RuPay. UAE already with Mashreq Bank and Network International have created the partnership with RuPay, and RuPay works here, by the way, right?
That's a great move. Yeah, that's a great move.
When PM was here last time. So that's a fantastic move. And these are some of the moves that Saudi is also planning. I think in the next 2 years, this transformation is going to happen. And you will also see a lot of Indian fintech, especially founders catering to both markets with subsidiary companies both in the UAE and Saudi, because they need local presence. Saudi needs a very strong local presence.
Yes, in fact, they demand a local presence once you reach a certain size as well. So just sort of drawing or deriving from that point, where you talk about the congregation of founders and tech ecosystems. Ajay, do you think there are certain things that the Indian market or learnings from the Indian market can be translated into, markets abroad in the UAE or Saudi Arabia and further ahead as well?
Yeah, so basically, see, this entire saga started from Silicon Valley, to be precise. They are the champions in building up the startup ecosystem, and we have significantly learned from there. So, like, I am sitting in Bangalore. This is called Silicon Valley of India, one of the top cities in terms of startups. And when it comes to a startup, you require that ecosystem, because you are building something from scratch. You have no idea how it is going to pan out. You have so many challenges in terms of operations, in terms of hiring, in terms of setting the culture right, in terms of raising the investment. So at the end of the day, how much ecosystem is supporting you, supporting a founder, supporting a startup is the question. And we have come up age here in Bangalore, and we are now churning startups, which are now, so earlier it was more of an India story. Now we have companies which have gone out in global markets. Some of them are unicorns now. And from here, we see that there could be a possibility of next $100 billion company, valued companies from India, or maybe $1 trillion at some point in time. That is all because of the ecosystem. And as a founder, I feel that UAE is on the right path. There are right kind of support from the government, from the regulatory, and from various other bodies. The ecosystem is thriving, and that's why lots and lots of Indian founders now looking at UAE very, very favorably because of all these initiatives taken by the government and the local authorities. And we are going to, so it's just a matter of time. The sooner the better. We are going to see some of the large companies coming out of UAE. I think we already have one, Polygon. It's a UAE-based company. So I'm
are you talking about the crypto Ethereum-based Polygon?
Yes, Polygon. Yes,
Polygon.
Yes. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that you'll see some of the large companies coming out from the UAE market very, very soon.
Absolutely. Is there, I mean, we know, I mean, living here, we know that the fintech ecosystem is still, quite nascent compared to, India. I mean, wallets and instant transfers are just, just about breaking ground in the UAE ecosystem and that's because of a lot of reasons, a lot of systemic reasons as well. And we really feel that, the ground has been laid for fintech players and startups, especially from India, because the Indian fintech ecosystem is now, close to maturity, and it is, huge in size, to be honest. So for Indian, fintech founders, I don't think there's been a better time than now to sort of explore the UAE market, because the government is now here actively trying to open up the market. They're pushing for reform as well. So is that something that you see yourself, Samir?
On this, I have two views. Actually, there are certain policies which are startup friendly and kind of helps the startup to kind of get them into action quickly. On another side, there are also certain initiatives which kind of I would say act as a deterrent for a new startup in a space where government is already actively engaged.
Right.
So when it comes to policy, I think what UAE will achieve best is actually to maintain a good balance between, which is their playing ground and which is the startups playing ground, to clearly differentiate that. That will actually help the startups who are coming saying, hey, clearly, and if there is no policy, for example, there's absence of policy, obviously you guys are there to kind of create that framework for policy for government and other startups to come in and adopt those policies. But so the biggest challenge I would say for early stage, I'm talking about early stage, late stage companies find their way properly, right? I mean, they do not have to negotiate. They understand the vision, where they want to go, who to network with, how to get their green light, right? The early stage are which they struggle because they spend a lot of time trying to convince these government bodies to adopt the solution without understanding whether their solution will be a right fit in where they're already operating. So I think from that perspective, if that clarity is brought in by the policymakers, that will help tremendously to clearly then scout and bring in a lot of global entrepreneurs into Dubai. For example, the crypto fintech space is heating up, especially the crypto space, I would say. And in fact, some of the top fintech founders are also moved here. I was just interacting yesterday with a top escrow founder from India who's moved here permanently, right? So these things are happening at a rapid pace. But again, if those policy changes are clearly understood, because during our discussion, one of the things came out saying some of these things were not clear on how to kind of make that entry happen into a UAE bank, for example, right? So I think those strategic directions should be laid out transparently by the government bodies. That should,
I completely agree, because we've had experiences in the past where we have, sat down with government bodies and we've taken startups to them, and only to come out of the meeting with them saying that, hey, you know what, the government, we are not going to open this up for you guys. It's not about you. We're not just going to open it up to anybody. It's ours, and we're going to keep it ours. So there is quite a bit of agreement with that, what you just said, Samir. Just coming to my final question, and it's completely open on how you respond to it. We know that the UAE has a considerable lead, and especially pushed by Dubai and quickly chased by Abu Dhabi on the race for becoming the tech hub of the region. And Saudi Arabia also in the past few years has woken up to the fact that the petrodollar state will not last forever, and they need to move to a knowledge-based economy. And smaller countries in the region like Bahrain and Qatar also have dipped their toes into it. Who do you think is going to sort of win the race, to be the tech hub for the region? I mean, I know, yes, it is the UAE for now and for the foreseeable future, but do you see that changing anytime soon?
Yeah, I'll let Ajay take it up and then I'll respond.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you, Samir. So basically, yeah. So I think UAE is winning is this, from the Indian founders' perspective. UAE is winning it hands down. And like I'm not a prophecy guy here, so I cannot tell about the 10 years down the line. But for now, the proximity, the openness to accept startup, the futuristic vision, and then the willingness to convert to a knowledge-based economy, I think UAE is far ahead than the rest of the countries in the MENA region. And that's why when I said that Indian founders are looking at it as a gate to the MENA market, or maybe the gateway to the world market, just because we have the favorable condition from the various entities, various regulatory bodies, government, everyone, to establish ourselves in UAE market and take it to the world.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Ajay. Samir.
Yeah, my two pieces of thought. Both the countries have vision. Both the countries have capital. It is a matter of execution, right?
Yes.
Obviously, Saudi has much more dry powder at their disposal, right? So I would, and given the infrastructure they are creating right now for anyone to participate in the startup ecosystem and kind of become global, is far-sighted. But in terms of obviously adoption and execution of those policies and having equitable emphasis on localization versus globalization. I think the country one country which will succeed, which will allow the startups from their homeland to really globalize. That is the country which will succeed the race. So Maybe it's Saudi, maybe it's UAE. At this point, it's very hard to predict because obviously UAE has been in the 2010. One event changed how UAE looked at entrepreneurship. It's called the Celebration of Entrepreneurship. I was part of that event, and that completely changed. It's been 12 years since the wave has started, and Saudi is pretty new, by the way.
Yes.
So we should allow it time to mature, but in the next 3 years, it's gonna change completely. So by 2025, you will have a realistic picture.
Right, absolutely. We are all looking forward to it, and keeping a close eye on both countries and seeing how we can take local companies global and bring in global companies to become even larger as well. So yeah, I would like to thank both our panelists for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you and getting your insights. So this is me signing off on behalf of Tahseen Consulting. We help tech companies with a variety of things like engaging stakeholders, preparing for discussions with regulators, helping you with pushing for regulations, as Samir once mentioned, where there aren't the regulations, especially the tech ecosystems being so new here. There'll be a lot of spaces for new tech companies to play with, to move and to influence regulations as well. And if any of the viewers here want to talk more about expansion into this region, you can feel free to hit me up on my email and my phone number, which is both here. And I'll be more than happy to sort of demystify the region for you a bit further. Again, I would like to thank Ajay and Samir for joining us today. It has been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.